So I'm here to talk to you about emerging engineering talent. And I do want to remind you, though, of the rule of 2 feet. This conference, we understand you may have sat down, I may have written a much better description than I am a speaker, and you may decide, oh, I'm done with this. If you need to move, if you need to get out of here and go to another talk, I'm perfectly fine with that. So, yes, I'm here to talk about emerging engineering talent, a little bit about programs, and a little bit about some advice for people who are in that space, who are in the emerging engineering space. So here's the deal. I've practiced this talk just enough to kind of be sick of hearing myself, but not enough to be really smooth at this. So you're getting the worst of both worlds. Sorry about that, but that's how it goes. So what do I mean when I'm talking about emerging engineering talent? I'm really talking about someone who is early or at the start of their career. They may not have a typical CS education. They may have some training in a tech school, a boot camp, or an online program, or practical experience, but not a whole lot of it yet. They may be in a second career, or they may have a wildly different degree. So my agenda for today is kind of get you set up here, and then Act 1 is for the people who are trying to create programs, and some suggestions that I have around that. Act 2 is for the emerging talent. That's for those of you who are early career and are looking to get some ideas about growth. And I'm thinking that let's hold questions to the end of each of the acts, and at the very end, I have an assignment for you. So part of what I did by combining these two topics was to try to bring possible people who are hiring and possible people who are looking to get hired together in one room. And so we have a little mixer at the end that we will try to connect some of you. So, all right. So who am I? And why am I uniquely suited to talk to you about these two topics? I am a director of engineering currently, but I have a BA in English literature from the early 90s. I spent my early career as a technical writer, and I had some interest in programming, but I did not follow up that in school. But as I was doing technical writing, the vehicle for delivering messages was a little more interesting to me than writing the messages. So I got hyper-focused on things like the World Wide Web, and I spent a lot of time doing view source and learning how other people programmed. That was in the days before there was ubiquitous open source. So here's me working with a little bit of view source code that I'm dropping on somebody else's website. So I've had the great honor, though, to be able to build some teams since about 2006, and spent a little bit of time in there teaching as well at St. Paul College. And then I kind of bumped into this boot camp thing and mentored a couple of cohorts starting in 2015. And that led me to advocating for the hire of boot camp grads while I was at a media company at Gannett. And then I had my first exposure to a formal emerging tech program at Target in 2020, and I was really impressed with how that goes. So that's enough about me. What about you? I'd like a quick show of hands. So who in here is emerging engineer? Can you give us a wave? All right, that's a pretty good population. How about anybody who's kind of thinking about programs? Can you give us one of these? Anybody? Oh, this is a pretty one-sided talk. Oh, you're there. Did I see a thumb?
I'm just not sure I understand the question.
So, yeah. Oh, you retracted your thumb. Is anybody here thinking about building an emerging tech program in their company? No. Yes. No.
Is it an emerging?
Well, an emerging tech program would be recruitment and development of people who don't have a typical CS background. So trying to create on-ramps. So I see we have people who will be interested mostly in the second act of my talk, which is fair, and I can plow through the first act a lot faster. So good to know. This is why you poll your audience, especially when you do things like this. Hey, welcome, they're all asleep. Okay, so this kind of throws off my assignment at the end, but I'm still going to tell you about it because it's on my slides. So emerging engineers, I want you to think about advice you would give someone who was trying to create a program. How about the rest of you? There are some people in here who didn't like wave their hand at all. There are a couple of you. You're sort of the non-player characters in the room. So NPCs, you have a role here too. Think of your favorite command line tool and keep that in mind. And then we'll just do a mixer at the end and we'll share these things, right? And then, well, if there were any program people, I was going to ask them to suggest a podcast or a book for you folks, but it's not happening. So all of that's out the window anyway. Let's see. Programs I've kind of been associated with. I'm currently, so by the way, I'm not here directly representing my employer, which means I didn't have to run my slides by anybody in marketing or communications, which is the freedom side of it. The other side is I'm not really going to go into depth about the programs at my current or recent employers. So I currently work for somebody who's a shop and delivery service that is a wholly owned subsidiary of a large retailer here in Minneapolis. And I've worked for said large retailer as well. So those are the two places where I have the most experience with these programs. And prior to that, I worked for Gannett, and that's where I did a lot of advocacy for hiring bootcamp graduates. So kind of give you the where and what. All right, so why? Hey, why should you create a program to bring on emerging talent? To save money? No. No, it's not to save you money. And if that's the purpose for doing that is like, hey, I want to bring on people who don't need as big of a salary. You are spending money on them. You are developing them. You are developing other talent in your company. So don't get that, don't have that as your motivation. Your motivation should be trying to get new ways of thinking in my engineering teams, trying to diversify my talent in both underrepresented groups, bringing them into my engineering group, different ways of thinking, different approaches to doing the job. Those are your reasons. Those are the real reasons. Creating a career path. So say you work for a company who has, I don't know, maybe a bunch of retail people who work for you, or maybe you have a large service organization, and these people have context about your company. They know how things actually work, not how things theoretically work. To tap into that pool of talent within your company and create a program where you could add an additional career path for people who are maybe more of a semi-professional is a pretty powerful thing, because you will teach them skills they will already have the context. And so that I find is one of the biggest reasons to create a program for emerging talent. And then also, it helps to change your engineering culture. Your engineers, if they are very, very isolated, they develop an ivory tower kind of a viewpoint. And so, especially if this group builds tools for this group of people, if you don't have any cross-pollination, there's not a lot of asking, hey, what would you like to see in that tool? There's, take this tool or shove it, so those types of things, creating that cross-pollination is very helpful. So yeah, you're creating on-ramps. You're not trying to save money. All right, what's the secret sauce if you're trying to create a program to transition people from one profession to another, and into something that is a highly skilled and highly specialized profession. This is not just something that you tell your TA, your talent acquisition team, hey, why don't you go talk to some of those people over there, and throw them on engineering teams, and that turns into hazing. That's not really, developing people, developing programs, and preparing them for what a new job. So having them work together, both your talent acquisition team and your engineering team. Your engineering team should be helping you to with curriculum and helping you to train the other teams who are going to be host teams. These are very important. What you want is you want a smooth program. You want people with empathy, and you want people who have the same goals as you. So, looking over my notes that I'm not looking at all. Okay, so one of the positive results, though, of something like this, of a program like this where you're onboarding people, is that your host teams begin to do things like create better documentation. They create better processes for onboarding teams. And these things these pay dividends down the road. So I don't know how many of you have just been onboarded to a team and taken a look so go get the repo and do the stuffs. The README is the basic README, and so it's just a roadblock right from the start. And so adding these types of programs, your initial cohorts can be bumpy, but as you move down the road and you've gotten through that experience a few times and you've gotten a few people around. So there we go. All right. So if you are developing the type of a program where you've got a cohort or a group of people within your company that you're trying to convince to join your program, you got to give them a taste. You can't just, walk into the room and say, I'm going to pick you, you, and you, and here you are. You really need to develop these ways for them to understand the job before they commit to trying to take a step. Can you involve them in some sort of hackathons? Can you create and put self-paced learning for them in front of them so they can even just try it out and, really basic hello world, but just the types of things that will give them an opportunity to just understand a little bit of the flavor of programming. Give them job shadows as well. This is really big because some people really are working in a feed-based kind of a job where their work is pushed to them. This is where they are going to be pulling work off of a stack, and they need to understand, I have a completely different workflow, and you need to set folks up for that. So other things that I've seen that work really well, if you're not getting people from the outside, if you have a program within, is that you also have a benefit of either partnering with a boot camp and using and setting a curriculum for them to work on with your cohort, or sponsoring the tuition for a boot camp, sending people out, then having them come back. So both of those are techniques as well. So evaluating talent. You do have to evaluate people. There's no two ways about it. But are you just evaluating the people you're training and engineers? No. You also need to evaluate your teams. You need to be able to give the emerging talent who's come in a chance to say, this team did X, Y, and Z for me. They gave me a buddy. They actually worked with me. They paired with me. We put code in production, those types of things, because those are the activities that are going to prepare them to be able to be part of a team. And then you also need to get honest feedback into your program about, did the program prepare the mentors, the host teams? Did the program provide community for the engineers who were in the program? So I think, honestly, the most important thing that you need to do as you're building a program is build community. And you need to build community for the people who are joining your company or joining your program. But you also need to build community for the host teams. So if you're just assuming that all existing engineering teams are good at onboarding people, you're making a mistake with that kind of thinking. So you really do need to give them the ability to, say if you've got mentors in 5 different teams, have those mentors come together regularly as well. Have your cohort of emerging talent come together regularly so that you can hear from them during this process of their growth, how they are progressing, and you can make micro adjustments along the way. So that's I think that is the sauce. That is the secret sauce, is making community happen for this, for the talent and for the teams. I've also seen job rotations work, but this is the type of thing, if you have a program, you have to be a pretty damn big company to be able to have job rotations work. And you also need to have the rotation long enough so that the person does something meaningful and doesn't just feel awkward for another month, because that's, one of the negative side effects is it just, nobody gets comfortable ever. And so your program, then the overall sentiment about your program is discomfort. And I don't think that's what you're striving for either, right? So let's see here. And one of the things that I think is important if you've got one of these types of programs where you've got employees who are internal from some pool who are trying this on for size, you also have to have an exit strategy, a comfortable exit strategy if it just didn't work. Whether they're not comfortable with it, whether they did not meet your bar for tech needs or being able to work on their own in a self-paced world, you really need to have an elegant way to bring them back to their old job. They should have been able to do this with fairly low risk. And so seeing programs implement things like that, a corporate program like that, I think is a pretty powerful thing. Because in the end, you want it to be a positive experience for people in your company, and you want them to maybe recommend it to the person next to them if they see that that they have capabilities. So this is the last of the program slides. There are actual apprenticeship programs with the state of Minnesota that you could register. If you've built out a program, you could register. And there's both apprenticeships and dual training pipeline programs, and the state can help you in your program for that. And so these are in the slides. So if you get the slides after I upload them, you can follow those resources. Yes?
Can you clarify dual training? I don't fully understand.
Yeah, so as I've read it, dual training is really the type of program I was describing of, I've created a program within organization A. I have a body of people who are in that organization who will work and train and still stay within the same company. And so it's creating the career path within the company. Whereas apprenticeships, the state is, you have a registered apprenticeship program. The state will funnel people to your company because you have a registered apprenticeship program. And I think, as I understand it, those are the biggest differences is, do I have a program for growth within my company, or do I have a program where I'm accepting people who are from apprenticeships? And there are apprenticeship programs for IT and programming positions. And so that was another thing I was like, are you sure? And I started digging around, and there are programs associated with our industry. So, yes?
I have a slightly convoluted question, so I'm going to try to keep it succinct, or at the very least cleanly delineate what the two pieces of the question are. One was, I'm hearing you say that like it takes an organization of a certain amount of size and resources to be able to actually implement like company-wide training scaffolding.
Yeah.
Right? That might have rotations. It might have
Yep.
your senior engineers able to actually carve out some of their time towards like dedicated training and mentorship.
Yes.
I think for plenty of us who are looking for jobs right now, right? Like I just got laid off, but I had 1 year of my first career.
Yeah.
And so I worked like dedicated with one senior developer, and he was self-professed not a very good trainer, right? I have a background in education, so I was like, oh, let me try to figure this out and write some documentation, right?
Yep.
But I don't think it's common to see a culture of training juniors and intermediate devs within small and medium organizations. And so I'm curious what some of your thoughts are for, that the larger number of companies that are of a smaller size, how can they begin to actually put this into practice when they probably need their senior devs contributing? Like juniors are seen as a brain drain so often.
Yeah.
But that's so upside down, because how are you going to make senior positions?
It is. One of the misconceptions that I see is that exactly as you're saying, that suddenly people who are the highest velocity are no longer applying all of their velocity to making money. What you're creating when you do have a mentorship situation, though, is you're creating leadership training. And so the mentors are that next generation of leaders in your company. And so you do have to see it as a long game. If the company is struggling, the margins are thin, and they are quarter to quarter, it will be harder to convince an organization to develop a program like this, admittedly. But the point is that what else are they getting out of a program like this? Aside from diversity of thought, they are also developing that next level of engineering leadership, which I think is a point that often gets missed.
Do you have any interesting ideas? I mean, I get that this.
I have no interesting ideas.
But I mean, in terms of like how to proselytize that, right? Because I think the newer generation of developers, especially people who are coming in from non-traditional, non-CS degree program, right? Kind of see the organic quality and value of that. But it's not something I see or hear much of among the older guard. Right. I'm curious, how have you gotten movement on that? Like, what are some of the ways you've seen that idea gain traction?
So, moving on. But part of my philosophy for, well, at least since building teams starting in 2006, is how important it is to build teams with texture. And texture meaning that you have multiple levels of experience on the team, and that I encourage and I work on building a culture within teams in my part of the organization to have learning through teaching, and not just personal, hidden away, I'm learning this thing, so then ta-da, I can, magically tell you about this exciting new technology. But learning it to teach it to another person is a completely different way. And so using the education philosophy around that as well, and trying to get people focused to grow through teaching. So it's a little hand wavy because, well, I wave my hands when I talk, but that's a philosophy that I try to drive. So.
Can I chime in with one thing?
Sure thing.
Okay. One thing that's very direct with, like, say, a senior engineer is used to be a worker bee. They kind of own their section of
Yep.
the code. So I tell them, okay, you own the code. If it goes down, you're on vacation, I'm calling you. Or we can teach other people how to deal with your
Build a bench. Build a bench for your area of the experience, right?
So, yeah. The team, that's something that it's the engineers, they're worker bees. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, James. Really valid point. Now, everybody else in the room. So, for you engineers, as you're new in your career, this is something I just really, really, really want to impress upon all of you. You are not a drain on the team. You add value to the team. Your questions, your presence, being there, you do add value. You're not a guest. If people make you feel like a guest, that's incorrect. And that is unfortunate, and I apologize. Hopefully you weren't on any of my teams. But you are there for a purpose, to do a job. And then also your learning adds value to that team. Those questions, all of that is going to add value to the team. So don't think for a moment that you're not allowed to see all the repos. You're not allowed to do all the things. Now, granted, you want to be careful when it comes to production, and you want to have a guide, but you are there for a purpose. So don't take a back seat just because you're kind of new. So, I want you to think about this. You're bringing something in. Maybe you're in a second career. Maybe you came from another part of the company. If you came from another part of the company, you have context that the engineering team doesn't have. Apply that. Tell them that. If you came from some sort of a job that was customer facing, you have very valuable experience that the engineering team doesn't have. Share that with them. Tell them the opinions you have heard while working with customers. If you came from a completely different type of job and ask why things are done in the order that they are, that's okay. And as people explain that, if you have other ideas on that, tell people. Just share that experience. Hey, maybe you managed people in a former job, and the people you're now working with haven't. Teach them to manage up. You manage up. You've got a manager who maybe has never had somebody working for them who knows how to manage up. So working with your manager, being better at working with your manager than your peers are, is going to differentiate you. I promise. Being the brilliant jerk on the team, let somebody else do that. If you can be very easy to work with and take instruction and give feedback to your manager, that's going to help you along in your career as well. One of the things that I think a lot of people shy away from is reviewing PRs. And so it's very easy to walk in and say, oh, I'm new to the code base, and I shouldn't, so-and-so senior engineer just submitted a PR. I probably shouldn't comment on that. Yeah, you should. And you should look at what other comments come in on PRs, because you will being a part of that process will take the fear away, or maybe it'll add a little bit of fear, but you'll know what the fear is when you submit your first PR. And so you understand how the team works on doing that. And I referenced this article from a Pinterest engineer about how to review code as a junior developer. It's fantastic, and I'm not going to try to just sit here and read it to you. But I have it linked in the notes here as well. It's a really good article and empowering, just sort of reminding you of the value you bring as a person who asks some questions, asks the wrong questions, and what do you learn from asking the wrong or right or whatever questions. So again, I just try to make sure that all of you know that you are bringing value as a part of the team. And so that's just a big one that I see everybody sort of backing away from. Maybe I shouldn't do code reviews of other people's code. One thing that you can do that I think is also a really good process as a newer engineer in a team is ask to pair review somebody's code. So like, can I be the second? Can you do a screen share while you're reviewing so-and-so's code, so I can at least see what tools you use? Do you actually run the code? Do you do things like debug the code down to the line you're wondering about? Or do they just read it and ask them how they know enough to just read it? Like what did they do to get to where they are? And so that's a great tactic as well. So what else do we have here? Offer to write onboarding docs. If you're new to the team, again, I told you play to your strengths. There's another strength. I'm just learning this stuff. Well, write it down while you learn it, because if nobody else has done it, this is going to add value for the next person who comes on. So your job isn't to get good at it and forget what the experience was of onboarding. That's called hazing. So don't be that. Don't perpetuate the hazing that exists in engineering teams. Offer to make it a better place. So, all right. So the other thing I think is super important, find your peeps. So you're here, you get it. You're at mini bar, so you're into community. That's cool. What else is out there? Meetups are out there, and I gave so much credit to that for my career. The meetup community here in the Twin Cities is absolutely fantastic, and you can find niche meetups like React or Angular, or you can find more broad meetups like JavaScript. So they all exist within sort of a very similar space. They're all really cool people in this town. So go to them. And then after you feel it, you've gained enough from them, give back. Like, be a volunteer. Take care of the community that took care of you. Contribute back to them. You don't have to give a talk. You don't have to stand up here and sound like an idiot. But you could fold chairs. You could carry pizza boxes. You could help organize. And you are then giving back to that community, and you're learning a ton in the process as well, because the more just general low-touch interactions you have with people in this community, the greater chance you have of somebody giving you the, hey, I heard would you be looking for something? We're looking to hire another such and such, and so you just want to be in on those conversations. So I think it's really important that we not only write code, backing up, that we contribute, though, to open source as much as possible. So open source is going to help you. It's going to be something you can read. It's going to obviously allow you to build things faster. But making a contribution to an open source project is kind of like having public credentials out there. It's referenceable material of work you've done. And so, you know, the hardest part is to get over the inertia of your first commit. And so this is something that's recognized by some people out there, some heavy hitters like Kent Dodds and Scott Hanselman are like, hey, we don't have the next generation of contributors, and we really need to build that. And so they started a site that I have linked here called First Timers. And it's all about getting you, the first timer, really pumped up to do your first submission, code submission. There are a lot of projects out there that label first timer or super simple or whatever. They've got labels out there that help you find easy things, you know, to help with on an open source project. And those are the ones that you want to get started with and sort of get the feel of delivering code to the main branch of these important projects. And then also you learn so much along the way. So then the other is you're spending time there. Make it a habit to read code. There are so many repos out there. Just read them. See how they're structured. See how do they write tests. Do they write good tests? Do they write bad tests? Do they write no tests? Why? You know, but learn about it. And that will help you as you spend time in code in your daily job. And so reading it is going to take you a long way. I know that for authors of fiction, their big thing is I read. You know, read a lot so that you can write. And I think the same goes with code. So, all right. Possibly unpopular, but I think taking notes is one of the more important tools that you can develop in your job. And so my recommendation is there are different levels of notes. There are ephemeral notes that you're writing to just sort of commit something to memory, but the note itself isn't the important thing. And to me, personally, those are handwritten notes. I write them. I don't often refer back. But if you're trying to do something that's a little bit more durable, I recommend that you also add a practice of reviewing those notes at the end of a day and committing them to something more durable or reorganizing them. Similarly, so journaling, taking a look at look back at your day. What did I do today? A really cool side effect of that is you're not the person in stand-up who's like, yesterday, I did that one ticket. You know, if you're the succinct person and you get on and you get through and you get to pass it on to the next person, that makes an impression on your coworkers and your manager. And so that journaling, if you work that muscle, and then that flows into summarization, being able to kind of look at your week as a whole and summarize what's going on. Because as you move along in your career, not only are you going to be asked to, hey, what did you do? But what did the team do for this week? Or, hey, you were in that incident. I need to have a description written up of how everything went down and what we learned from it. So you working on that and understanding how to take a group of facts and take them from being a word salad to a decent meal is going to be helpful. Tell that story and present those facts to people along the way. And so that's going to be one of those next level in your career, going to be really helpful for you. All right. Always be learning. So you may think right now, oh, I gotta get my hands on some ChatGPT. It's not as important as being just a whiz at your ticketing system for the company that you're working in. It's not as important as having a really kick-ass development setup, with your editor or your IDE. Those things are going to really help you out. And learn those tools, learn how to configure them, learn how to save those configurations off into a repo somewhere so that your next computer, because you don't want an upgrade of a computer at your new company to be a burden, do you? You want it to be easy, so you save off your config files. Come to understand those things really well. That is going to make you much more portable. And in this world, that's a really helpful thing to be. So, yeah, it's not a real shiny thing to be great at your ticketing system, but it's a very important part of doing your job. So don't shy away from that. Learn your debugging tools. Hey, if you're a backend engineer, if you do write APIs most of the time, it's still really important to know how to open up the console in Chrome or the dev tools in Safari and understand what the heck those front-end engineers are doing with your API. So it's really important to be able to do that even if you're not a front-end engineer. And then as a front-end engineer, gosh, you just absolutely have to be able to look at the console. And so sit down, do tutorials on that. Get to a point where you're really comfortable sort of picking apart what's going on in the browser. Log aggregation tools. So many companies are using tools like Splunk, things like that, where all of the logs go into one place. Well, get comfortable. Try to learn to do a query for a certain period of time for all the errors, and then group those errors so that you can get a count on how many different kinds of errors happened over a time period. If you can learn to do a query like that, you're going to really master navigating through logs, and you're going to be able to ask questions of your logs as opposed to just scroll. Oh, here's an error. So really coming to understand that things like your log aggregation, your ticketing system, they've got their own query languages. They're all SQL-esque. You've learned some level of SQL for poking at databases. These things are just data sources. So use the knowledge that you have for building apps to look into those systems and understand the information that's there for doing your job. Dashboards, if your team has dashboards, know where they are. Ask questions about why they graph it this way or that way. Ask about alerts that are there. Why do we have thresholds? What they are. Really understand how the applications that you are a part of, how they run, and what's an emergency and what's just, like acceptable errors, because there are those. So understand those thresholds. And so other just seemingly stupid things. Slack. Know how to search it. There's history in there, and know how to find that conversation that you had with Mark last week and where he told you something really important. Find out how to bookmark things. Set reminders. When somebody tells you about something, you could write it down in a note, or you could set yourself an annoying reminder to check back up on them. And so that's one of those ways that I've been using Slack, and just to keep nagging me. You got to do this. You said you're going to do this. Are you going to do this? Did you do this? Is this done? With Zoom, there are many different things that you can share within Zoom. How many of you have been in a conversation where people are like, I'm so tired that we're all remote and we can't get in front of a whiteboard. And they told you that in a Zoom conversation. Zoom has a whiteboard that you can share and work together on just ephemeral drawings. It's clunky. And let's see, what else do we have here? Command line. Let's see, who is it? Brian Hogan has a great book. So I've got that linked in the slides as well. So here we are to questions if you have any. Nothing.
Do you find that the requirements across the board will change for entry-level positions with that internal programming for people who take the traditional route? Will it be easier for them as well? Or is it a specialized requirement for these internal programs?
For the, I really think that we will continue to have both paths if companies are doing it well. I don't see traditional path getting harder. It may actually, though, increase the importance of internships for the traditional path, because the education and some experience is what you are going to need to set yourself above, I think. Yeah. Any others? Okay. Well, I told you I was going to require a mixer, but you're all, people who are looking for jobs or are early in your career, and there weren't any of those hiring people I was hoping to sort of pair you with here. So thanks for your time. I appreciate you just napping with me this afternoon. So.